Welcome to week 5. This is video 1 of 2 for this week. In these modules, we'll be talking about substance and rhetoric. We'll be taking a look at what your content should do, and then what you do to go about communicating that through messaging and through the universal language that you'll be using throughout all of your content. And as I present this, we'll also focus on a few of the case studies that are mentioned in Colleen Jones' book Clout, including the famous and popular online shoe retailer Zappos, the chocolate maker Lindt Chocolates, and a few other examples that I've found that relate to what we're going to talk about, including a very popular podcast called Stuff You Should Know by the How Stuff Works, or the Discovery Channel, who is the parent of that company. So in talking about substance and rhetoric, this is the final step before we begin structuring the implementation of our content plan. So where we go after we figure out our strategy, we then go and we pick the tactics that are aligned with our strategy. So we'll wrap up this area, we'll go through the midterm projects, then after that we'll talk about this implementation. We'll begin to talk about the specific digital tactics that are available to us, and then how we align those tactics to the strategy, and then how you'll go about you'll be bringing the substance and the messaging that we're going to talk about this week throughout all of the different tactics that you choose. So once again, we're not just choosing tactics for the sake of using them. What we're going to do is take our strategy, which has been the first half of this course, and then for the second half of the course, we'll figure out how to choose the appropriate tactics based on that strategy. And this week is really key, because then it's what kind of messaging we use. How do we go and really structure through the tactics that we'll be choosing in the second half of this course. So let's take a look. We'll talk about substance in this video, and then we'll talk about rhetoric in the next one. So really what we're going to cover today is, what should your content actually do? What is the actual substance of your content? And identifying what content you need is actually a pretty complicated process, say Halverson and Roch. And there are a lot of factors to consider, and we've been considering a lot of them now. But what we want to do now is identifying that content that you need. What we want to do is we want to take a look at several different components during this presentation and the next presentation. So this will actually be divided over the next two presentations. We're going to talk about audience and the content that they need, messaging, which is the substance of that content, the different topics that you can choose, the purpose of your content, that rhetoric, and sources for your content. So let's talk about audience here. And your content is really going to be much more effective and easy to manage if you really set some parameters and priorities about who your content is for. Now we're finally choosing that audience we've investigated. Now we're actually really envisioning what that audience is going to be. So to do that, we want to define our users, and we also want to define our priorities. So we actually want to say this audience is more important than that audience. So if we're talking about online shoes with Zappos, the young and the the people in their mid-20s and 30s might be more important of a user group than people in their 70s. So you would want to create content for those people that meet those demographics. So let's talk about both of those. First is, we want to define our user. Now this means we actually really want to explore the qualities of these people. We've talked about identifying them as different bases, but now we actually really want to do this mind exercise here. What we want to do is we want to what do we mean by our customers, our participants? We want to describe them in detail. We actually want to visualize them. What are their qualities? What do they actually make up? You might even want to envision one specific customer of different groups and actually start to visualize them. What are their qualities? What are their characteristics? What do they look like? What do they wear? What are their attitudes? You want to actually do this mind exercise and really start to envision that person. Then we want to actually define why these people are important to our entity's goals. Why do we need to create content for them? What do we actually want them to do with our content? Why would they be consuming our content? So then you'd actually want to make up a bulleted list of your basic user attributes and qualities. And from this, you'll have a better chance for creating content that they'll actually use. This is why I'm saying really describing them in detail. What are their qualities? Really getting to the heart of these people. Envisioning them, like I said. And then after you have made this clear picture of who these people are, and you'd want to do this for a couple different groups, as you can imagine, you want to actually use this to create a common understanding among your entire organization. You want to make sure that everyone in your organization has this similar clear picture and the standard user group to develop content for. And this common definition and understanding is that so everybody creates content that is for the same audience. So everybody's on the same page and they are creating that content for that same type of person. There isn't a gap between you and your colleagues in terms of who these people are. And then after you have actually envisioned these user groups, you want to define your priorities. And this is the hard part, is prioritizing your user groups. It's hard because we've heard about these different user groups from each set of the stakeholders, and they each kind of have a different audience in mind. So you want to take these user groups and you actually want to make a numbered list of your user groups, starting with your first priority. So who is your target audience number 1, who is target audience number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. And actually what you'd imagine is that you want to create content prioritized based on these groups. So you want to make more content, obviously, for user groups number 1 and 2 than user group number 5. That's just getting to your goals more easily and creating content based on those priorities, which is why we want to create these. And if you want to create content but you don't have a user group in mind, you actually need to rethink that content. So for instance, if you wanted to create a Twitter feed, we need to be on Twitter, but you don't have a group in mind about who would use that, the question becomes, why are you choosing that tactic? Why are you going to create this content for nobody in mind? So the idea here is to create content, like we said, with people in mind. And not only just with people in mind, but with the right audience in mind, the highest priority in mind. So this is a good indication of, like I said, choosing content that has a real purpose. Then we talk about messaging. You've got that audience in mind. Now we actually want to bring our core strategy to life through messaging. It helps you define what this content that you're going to create needs to actually communicate in order for you to get closer to that ultimate goal. It's what you're saying that is going to bring this to life, that is actually going to be the underlying messaging throughout all of your pieces of content, that common theme for that group. So where do you find, or how do you create these messages? And the truth is, you might not necessarily be the one who's creating these messages. You may know your messages from that existing pool of content. So say from your content audit, you understand that there's a certain theme. You can also probably see that a communication campaign could have talking points to emphasize from your marketing department, and you would just adopt those. So each separate audience that you have chosen will probably need to have its own subset of messages too, because different messages will appeal to different groups of people, and we'll talk about that in a little bit with things like tone and voice. And like we said, you want to adopt the messages that a group already has, or if they don't have them, you can create them. So you would always ask the organization if they have a list of messages that they want communicated throughout all of the pieces of their content campaign, and you can adopt the ones that make sense for your project. And if they don't have that, you'll need to collaborate with the appropriate teams to really develop a message. So what does that message usually look like, and how do you actually go about using that message in any content that you're doing. So we're going to talk about a theory called message hierarchy here. And here is our little hierarchy. We start with the base at a hierarchy, and then we move up. So on the bottom is something called a primary message. And that is really the most important thing you want the user to know after viewing your content. And the message, the primary message, is applicable to all of your audiences. And we'll have an example of this in the next slide. For the secondary message, it's really a group of messages that support the primary message and give it context. These highlight things that are maybe the competitive advantages or product differentiators, and they may not necessarily be applicable to every single audience. And then moving up, we have details. And all of the various proof points behind the primary and secondary messages are in the details. So you can think about this as perhaps a magazine article, where the primary message is the title, and then you'll have different sections or subheads of that article, and those are like the secondary messages. And then the details are kind of all the sentences between those subheads. Or you can say this presentation. So the title of the presentation is the primary message, the sections are the secondary message, and all the bullet points are the details. So we have that core message, we have kind of the subheads, and then we have all of the details in between. So let's do an example of this. We're going to use one of the case studies, which was Zappos. So if you look on Zappos's box and on their website, their primary message is literally all over the place on their boxes, on their website. It's powered by service. That is the message throughout everything they do. Now, a secondary message would be something like, we offer a no-risk shopping experience. We are always available to help you no matter where you are. We take the stress out of your shoe shopping experience. Those are not necessarily details, right? But those are kind of secondary themes. And then we move up on details. So the no-risk shopping experience would be something like the 365-day return policy or their free shipping back. We're always available to help you no matter where you are. We're on Twitter, we're on the phone, you can contact us via email, you can go via the website. And so those are details. So once again, we have that base primary message, secondary messages, which might not necessarily apply to every single audience, but are there to kind of support that primary message. And then the details are actually how those secondary messages are actualized, how they actually take place, the real proof in the pudding. So that is a message hierarchy and how you could apply that to one of the case studies that we've taken a look at. Then we want to talk about topics. And topics isn't really about, it's the topics that you're going to discuss in a blog post, on Facebook, on Twitter, on your website. Standard topics, areas that you would discuss. And topics isn't really about coming up with a giant, never-ending list of interesting subjects. It's actually about finding and selecting the right topic areas that meet your specific set of needs, or your audience's needs, and the needs related to your core strategy. Just because something is interesting, it might make for an interesting topic, but is it the right topic for your audience based on your core strategy? There might be another one that might be less intriguing to you, another topic that's less intriguing to you, but really actually resonates with what you're trying to do. You want to have topic discipline in what you do. You want it to be focused, and you don't want it to, like I said, be never-ending. You want to find those right areas and select the right topics for your specific set of needs. And so the formula for this is basically that you know what your audience wants and you know what you want to communicate. So you take these into account by using this formula. And it's audience plus your messaging equals your topics. The topic services the needs of your audience and is a device that you use to emphasize your messages. So it's interesting to your audience, and the messages are ingrained within your topics. So here are some examples continuing with Zappos. A topic would be case studies of problems solved for their customers. It concretes the idea that they're powered by service. It goes with that secondary message that they're there to help. And case studies provide those details. It's a topic related to your message and your audience. The CEO of Zappos has a book called Delivering Happiness. That's another way that they could, has a bunch of topics. And detailed videos about the products on their website is another topic area. Purpose. So purpose is basically the role that your content is going to play. And we discussed this a little bit last week when talking about gaps, but this is really about content itself and what it's made of. So here are some examples of content's purposes. And also to note, content may fulfill more than one purpose. For instance, in different campaigns, you'll see different examples of purpose in this. So I'll go through them and that might make more sense. So one role of a purpose for content may be to persuade, so to get the user to make a decision in your favor. So buy your products or agree with your opinion. Inform, which is to provide the user with information about a specific topic, the types of shoes you have, new offerings, and the like. Validate. It gives the user access to specific facts so they can do things like fact check. Instruct, so to teach the user how to do a task. And entertain, so help the user pass the time. So like I was saying before, content may fulfill more than one purpose. So for instance, in a political campaign, you would see persuasion and validation at work because you would get the user to make a decision in your favor, and you would also give them access to the facts so that they would know that what you're saying is true. Or in education, you could see perhaps instruction and entertainment, and maybe even validation, so that you would teach the user how to do a task. They'd have specific facts, and it would hopefully be entertaining and help the user, be entertained and learn from that. So these are ways that content can fulfill more than one purpose. Coming up in video 2, we're going to talk about rhetoric and how you actually then go and communicate. So take a look at that, and we'll continue on with this presentation.